I'm of two minds about showering before a video. Of the one mind, I'm clean and it's lovely. On the second mind, my hair doesn't dry for a few hours, so like it doesn't look the best on camera. Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for May 8th through 14th. This week I read one book, I watched 2 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 3 audiobooks. The first book we're going to talk about is A Rip Through Time by Kelley Armstrong. This is the first in a series and it comes out on May 31st. In some ways I feel like this book was written specifically for me because it's written by a Canadian author. The protagonist is Canadian and she's in Edinburgh because her grandmother is sick and she wants to be there in case she goes. And then all of a sudden she gets sent back 150 years in time and has to solve some murders. If you're new here, Edinburgh is my very favorite city in the entire world. I used to live there, I used to be a tour guide there. I just love that city, so any chance to revisit it in literature is a-okay with me. Something I really enjoyed about this is not only is this character trying to figure out why this happened, she kind of comes up with a reason why but not a reason how because time travel. She also now has to deal with this on her own because if she tells people in 1869 to Edinburgh that she's traveled through time, she's going to end up in an asylum. The interesting thing about this though is she doesn't look like herself, she's been transformed into the body of somebody else, and that means if she pretends that she has somewhat of a head injury and has some memory loss, she can kind of muddle by at her day job and try to figure things out by night. I don't want to say much more than that besides if you're a fan of forensics and history and murder mysteries, this is definitely one you're going to want to pick up. I am so excited for this series and I just want the next one to be out, but obviously since this one isn't even out yet, technically it's probably going to be a while and I'm just like, can I have an arc, please, please, please. On to what I watched this week. We watched season 2, 3, 4, 5, and part of season 6 of Travel Man. If you're not aware of this show, it is in fact a travel show in which Richard Ayoade and a different guest every episode go to a different place you could do a mini break at from London. So locations where you could conceivably fly there, stay for 48 hours, and fly home. This is a lot of fun not only because Richard Ayoade is just a gem and the way he banters with other people is great, the voiceovers are also lovely, there's usually a lot of alliteration, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. It really makes me want to go traveling. It's really fun when they go to a location I've been to before and I can be like, I've been there, because that's always been a thing between Chad and I. And there's a little bit of a satisfaction in knowing that I could go to these places and spend less money than they do, but it is also very fun to watch them spend a bunch of money and see cool things that I probably never will, like the inside of some very amazing hotels. We also watched a few more episodes of Our Flag Means Death. I believe we have 2 episodes left and we just couldn't finish them that night and then just never got around to it again, but I'm sure we'll finish them this week. What can I say that everybody doesn't already know? This show is wholesome and queer, and I love that there's like confirmed queer characters. That was lovely to find out, because I've tried not to look at anything to do with the show until I have finished it, so I didn't know if it was going to be very queer-baity or if it was just gonna be like, oh, these characters could be queer but not confirmed, but then you see some characters that are confirmed and you're like, yes! I also found out tangentially from Audrey's April wrap-up that the actor that plays Jim is non-binary, and that just made me very happy. I'm interested to see how the last couple of episodes go, and then I'm interested to see if this is a show that was just a one-off or if they're gonna do more. Like I said, I've tried to see as little as possible until I've actually watched the show. On to the movie we watched this week. We watched this last night because we wanted some 90s trash, which this definitely was, and it was Romy and Michele's high school reunion. Now this is fun because Lisa Kudrow is fun, this is fun because of a couple of the other actors that are in are fun, but there's also a certain element to it that you're just like, oh, this is so very 90s. And I'm not just talking about the outfits, because yes, those are very 90s, but I can deal with that. I'm more so talking about the fat shaming. And it's hard to even call it fat shaming when the person being shamed for being too fat is stick thin, and I hated every time they brought that up. At the core of this, it is a very sweet tale about 2 best friends. There are some things that definitely happen in this where I'm like, why did we have to do this? Like, oh, you're interested in this person now that he's rich. Cool, I love that. So overall, this movie has its pluses and its minuses. It doesn't really stand the test of time, but if you're able to put all of that aside and just watch it, there are some very amusing things that happen. On to the 3 audiobooks I listened to this week because I listened to them while doing a lot of cross-stitching, and because usually I've been listening to true crime YouTube videos while I work, and now I've just changed it over to working while listening to an audiobook sometimes. time, so that also explains the uptick. The first of these audiobooks was The Sentence. So this is an interesting book because when it starts out, it's about this woman who went to prison for transporting a body over state lines that had drugs on it that she didn't know about, and then she eventually gets out of prison a little bit earlier than she was supposed to because the other people involved, the people that set her up, actually confessed to setting her up. So she's out and working in this bookstore, and then one of her patrons dies and is haunting the bookstore. As a side note, the bookstore sounds amazing. It's an Indigenous owned business that primarily deals in Indigenous books and then other things as well, because bookstores need to stay alive somehow, and it would be very interesting to visit if it actually exists. However, partway through this book we also hit 2020 and all of the fun that that has brought, not only from the virus that we became very aware of around March, but then also the protests that started happening around May, June. Because of that, this sometimes feels like two separate books, and yet at the same time, if you were living during this time frame and you had a ghost at your store that only harassed you, and then suddenly this global thing started happening, yeah, I guess this is pretty much how this would go. I enjoyed that this had a strong sense of community. I enjoyed that there was queer representation. I enjoyed that we got to see more of these side characters and a little bit outside of their lives in this current terrifying moment of history. I needed something a little bit softer after that, so my next audiobook was Rosaline Palmer Takes the Cake. This is about this woman who is going onto a show called Bake Expectations, which is pretty much exactly the same thing as that other British baking show that you might know of, but obviously for copyright reasons it's not that. She's a single mother, and since she had her child at age 19, her parents have looked down on her and thought that she didn't live up to her potential and never became a doctor, and she basically just wants to win the money from the show, not only to show that she's a great baker, but also so she can pay off some of the debt to her parents so that she can stop thinking about how much they disapprove of her. They absolutely love their grandchild, but they are constantly giving her shit. On the way to the very first day of taping, there is a huge train snafu, and she ends up in the middle of nowhere with another contestant, and they basically have to spend a night somewhere and then eventually get to the taping, and that's a whole big thing. And he's pretty attractive, so she starts talking to him and ends up lying a little bit about her background because she doesn't feel like she's all that impressive, and that obviously definitely never comes back to bite her in the butt. I really liked getting to know the other contestants on the show. I could see from a mile away how things were going to go with a little bit of a triangle that forms, and also the whole reason why somebody might be broken up with. I saw telegraphed from chapters and chapters away, and I was just, every time a little bit of another piece of it clicked in, I was just like, it's gonna be that annoying thing that I hate, isn't it? Yeah, it's gonna be that thing that some people do that makes me want to punch them. Oh, yep, here it is. And that's not me being mad at the book, that's me being mad at the people that do that thing. But I knew it was going to happen, and the main character didn't, because she's a good person and just assumes that other people are good people, and sometimes they're not. This is also apparently the first in a series, so we're going to see a whole new set of bakers in the next one. I'm pretty sure is how it's going to go, and I'm very excited for that. I also really loved the woman that was kind of the backgrounds of the show. She swore so much, she yelled at people so much. Her character was just very, very interesting and hard, and I just really loved that character. And then the host character was also particularly hilarious to me. If you can hear the floor squeaking, that's because my roommate is getting ready to go to work, so that's what that is. And I believe those are also shower sounds, so enjoy that background noise. The third and final audiobook I picked up this week was Sons of Fortune. This is a book that I knew nothing about going into because I picked it up for the 12 challenge. I believe at this point I am 8 books into the 12 book challenge. This book takes place over many, many decades, but we basically get to see the love story of these two different sets of parents and then them trying to have children. On one side, we have these parents that have twins, and that's very exciting for them. And on the other side, we have a husband and wife that have had fertility issues, and they finally have a son. However, in the night, that son dies, and the nurse for that child actually ends up swapping him out with one of the twins. From there, we go on to see these siblings growing up separately and the different things that happen in their lives and how they are very parallel at points or they differ at other points. You then also spend a lot of time wondering if they're ever going to overlap, and if they do overlap, if it's going to be in a very meaningful way. And you see them kind of sort of overlap throughout the years, but they don't really overlap until their 40s. I ended up really enjoying this one, especially because they had a common foe, and I liked seeing how that element of it played out. However, I don't know if I needed to know quite so many details of their entire entire lives. This book is over 600 pages, so it definitely had time to talk about those different things, but I don't know if I actually needed this to be a 600-page book. I also had a problem early on trying to distinguish between the two because their lives were very, very similar up to a certain point in, I believe, university. So besides maybe wanting them to have a hobby that has nothing to do with politics at some point just to differentiate them, that would have been nice. It wasn't completely necessary. Like I said, I ended up enjoying this, but I did feel like I was slogging through a lot of things kind of initially. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this program, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below with a bunch of different goodies. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!